Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Mikah, Sargent, and I speak with Dave Gershgorn about bias in AI. Also, we talk about the invasiveness of test proctoring online, how to troubleshoot your home Wi-Fi for working from home, of course, the race to contact tracing apps and how it could have some consequences along the way, and Google Meet is attempting to outzoom Zoom. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Stay in control when it comes to your company's access points and authentication. LastPass makes enterprise-level security simple for your remote workforce. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 131, recorded Thursday, April 30th, 2020. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Barracuda. Did you know that 91% of all cyber attacks start with an email? To uncover the threats hiding in your Office 365 account, get a secure and free email threat scan at barracuda.com/TNW.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking that tech news. I am Mikah, Sargent.
And I'm Jason Howell, with the occasional chicken noise coming from out the window. My apologies if you hear a chicken.
You have chickens?
We don't, but our neighbors do. And this is like second floor bedroom that looks right down, like over the fence is their chicken coop. So, yeah, sometimes that's fun and sometimes it's not.
Second floor bedroom that looks across to the second floor bedroom where they keep their chickens.
That would be a little weird, but it's close. It's very close.
I just imagine you staring across and a chicken staring back and you're both just staring at each other from the window. Well, folks, we are here yet again to talk to and about people making and breaking that tech news. And there was a big breaking story on Tuesday. OneZero, that's Medium's publication, reported that the CEO of a surveillance and artificial intelligence company called Banjo had been associated with members of the KKK in his youth, and was also involved in a shooting at a synagogue in Tennessee. That story, of course, is available on OneZero, but it brought to light kind of a bigger conversation that I happen to have been sort of having separately without this knowledge. And it's one that we regularly have. And it talks about how artificial intelligence, because of its creation by humans, which are inherently biased, results in bias itself. And I'm excited to have Dave Gershgorn here with us to talk about bias in AI. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, good. So let's kick things off. Could you give? I think we kind of got the basics down there, but could you talk about what exactly Banjo is, who or what organizations were using Banjo, and then we can kind of break into the larger story here of bias in AI.
Totally. So Banjo is a company that sells basically one product called Lifetime, and what that product does is import tons of data from different sources like social media. In Utah, they were connected to the CCTVs that the public safety department had. It was like highway traffic cameras, things like that. And this company sold event detection. So if something were to happen that was noteworthy to one of their clients, they would receive some sort of automated alert. At least that's what Banjo says. We don't have a lot of visibility into how this works, how the algorithm works. Today and yesterday, it kind of came to light that the state of Utah is pausing a lot of the contracts with Banjo, and Banjo itself is pausing its own use of its tool in Utah until audits are able to be completed. So The company has about 200 employees. They're based in Las Vegas and California, and they have 2 offices in Utah. So so Utah, the Attorney General had a contract with them. The Department of Public Safety had a contract with them, which was worth $20 million. And there are likely more that we don't know about.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is obviously, given the use of the product and sort of the groups that use the product, I think that's what really kind of shines a light on this. But the fact is, a lot of companies and a lot of organizations make use of machine learning, artificial intelligence, deep learning, all these different tools in different ways. And, folks might not even realize that many of their devices are making use of these types of tools day to day. So the fact is, with a system that is so that permeates our sort of ecosystem so much, we have to be aware of the biases that are in place. And I think that you described it perfectly in your article. And I don't want to give everything away. I want people to go check out the article. But could you tell us your pet metaphor? Because I think it's great.
Oh no, I have a pet metaphor? Now I have to look at my article. I did have a little something that I was thinking about in terms of predictive policing, where I think there's a really kind of classic example that is an argument against using just straight data from police in terms of predictive policing, where it has been well documented that communities of color are policed more heavily across the board. And because those communities are policed more, there's more data being fed into the machine about those communities. And crime seems higher there because there's a higher police presence, and the police are writing people up for more tickets. They are arresting more people in those areas. So the algorithm sees that glut of data from that specific community and assumes, oh, there's a lot of crime there. And then it sends the police there again. So this is a societal bias that gets encoded into an algorithm and kind of just perpetuates these kind of biases that are already present. And when I was talking to Meredith Whitaker, the co-founder of AI Now, about this, she was sure to point out that the people who lose out and the people who are persecuted more by these algorithmic systems are the people who are already being punished by society and the people who are already experiencing the harm of societal bias. So it's nothing that's necessarily new, but we're coding these systems, these societal biases and these societal systems into our software. And this is a opportunity to kind of look at the kinds of values we want our machine learning algorithms to have and strive to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. So the example that you gave is about, and it's sort of a simple explanation of how we create these tools and therefore may introduce a bias without realizing it. So I'm going to flip it on its head. You say, if you're a dog person, I am one, and so I'm biased, so I'm going to change it. If you're a cat person and you're training an algorithm with a library of cats, well, you are going to use, millions of pictures of cats as you're going through and saying, yes, this is a cat. Yes, this is a cat. Yes, this is a cat. But you might only use 1,000 pictures of a dog. So then you say, no, this is not a cat. No, this is not a cat. But if you don't have the entire scope of both of those and other animals as well, no, this is actually a ferret, not a cat, then you are going to introduce bias into the system where at times it's going to believe, oh, this actually is not a cat, and then it ends up being a cat, or vice versa. I like that, sort of breaking it down a little bit. And, you touch there on, we have these simple tools. I can remember an app that I think was, you fed it a picture and then it determined if the photo that you sent it was a burrito or not a burrito. Those are simple tools, yes. But these things go even deeper than that. And you mentioned Amazon as one instance where artificial intelligence, they've used that in the past, correct?
Yeah, so this was a report from Reuters that was about a year or two ago, and Amazon had been trying to internally develop a hiring tool that was like the holy grail was that you could feed it a whole bunch of resumes and it would give you the top 5, and then you just hire those people. That's like basically what they wanted to be able to do, but it was based on resumes that Amazon had gotten, which is a reflection of a subsection of the technology industry, and that meant that there were a lot of similarities. The tech industry isn't known for being incredibly diverse in a lot of ways, especially in certain positions. So it was very heavily male dominated, and the algorithm was so male dominated that if there was a reference to a women's college or any part of the resume had the word woman in it, it would be downranked because these male factors were so influential in the algorithm. So that's just one example of how the training data that you have, even if you intend it to be as unbiased as possible, can kind of shade the algorithm's final decision to be different than what you intended. Amazon ended up scrapping it. They didn't use it because it didn't work. I mean, that's one of the things where if you don't have a kind of good head on your shoulders and you're not making smart decisions, I mean, it working is a kind of a subjective phrase.
Touching back on, Mikah, your example with the cat, and then you mentioned, and maybe a ferret comes up along the way. The question that I have along this line is, like, maybe the creators of this algorithm never knew that a ferret was even part of the equation to begin with. Like, there was just no record. Like, they might know that a cat versus a dog, that makes a lot of sense, but ferret never even entered the picture. How can creators of these systems kind of ensure that they're focusing on everything equally, even in light of the fact that there will inevitably be variables that they could not have predicted or maybe hadn't identified yet? That seems like a big part of it too.
I agree. And I think that a lot of it is talking to a lot of people and not doing your work in a vacuum. I think it is very important for for machine learning researchers and engineers to be talking about subject domain experts and sociologists and understanding deeply how their systems work in the larger scopes of society. Audits are incredibly important, like the ones that Banjo is about to go through, according to the Attorney General of Utah's office. I think transparency, visibility, documentation, all of this is becoming a lot more of the norm as people realize that these algorithmic systems have incredible impact in our society. And I think that with transparency, with proper documentation of limitations, and being really transparent about how the algorithms are actually developed, and fostering those conversations between people who have been studying societal systems for their entire careers, and understanding how algorithms can fit into that in a better way that doesn't bring the worst of humanity into our future. I think it's critically important, and it's not something that we are unable to do. It's extremely possible if people are willing to communicate and put in the extra effort.
Yeah. Well, Dave Gershgorn, I want to thank you so much for joining us today to talk about bias in AI. This is a huge topic, and one that certainly, I don't know, it's something that we all need to be thinking of. And in fact, I want to quickly point out, I did an interview on triangulation with Ruah Benjamin, who has written a book about bias in AI. And so you might check out that episode. We'll include a link in the show notes as well. But please go check out Dave Gershgorn's article over on OneZero, and check out all of the publications on OneZero. I mean, you folks are doing some incredible work, and we thank you for that. If folks want to follow that work and follow you online, where do they go to do that?
Just go to onezero.medium.com. That's where you want to be. You'll see me there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you, Dave, for joining us, and hope you have an opportunity to clear your desk of seltzer water cans. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dave.
Time.
We'll talk to you soon.
Yep.
All right. Coming up next, how do students take tests online in this work from home world? We're going to talk about that. But first, we want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of Tech News Weekly, and that is Barracuda. Barracuda is the provider of cloud-enabled enterprise-grade security solutions that protect email, networks, data, and applications. Suddenly, you have dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of employees working remotely, each one of them getting tons of emails every day, making them vulnerable ultimately. 91% of all cyber attacks start in an email. So that's things like spear phishing, ransomware, account takeover, conversation hijacking. Multiply that by however many employees you have times how many emails. One click on the wrong email is going to cost you money. And it also costs you your customers, your reputation, a whole lot more than just money. Barracuda researchers have seen a steady increase in the number of coronavirus-related spear phishing attacks since January. They've observed a recent spike of 667% in this type of attack since the end of February. So you can get the protection that you need for your company with Barracuda Total Email Protection. A great solution. It includes a number of things: all-in-one email security, backup, and archiving. Also has AI-based protection from spear phishing, account takeover, and business email compromise. There's an automated incident response that actually gives you options so you can quickly and efficiently address attacks as they happen, as they bubble up. Security awareness training to educate your workforce so that your employees can be the first line of defense against attacks. And I mean, attacks, like I said, happening all over the map. I feel like I'm reading a new one each day, each week about what's going on right now in the world around all of this COVID-19 stuff. It's really kind of crazy. So you want to protect yourself. You want to be proactive instead of reactive. And that's what Barracuda is all about. Right now, there are new attacks impersonating organizations like the World Health Organization. Attackers utilize domain spoofing and promise information relating to the coronavirus in an attempt to trick users into a phishing scam. And that's just one example. So ensure the safety and security of your business with Barracuda. So to uncover the threats hiding in your inbox, get a secure, free email threat scan of your Office 365 account risk-free at barracuda.com/TNW. That's barracuda.com/TNW. Barracuda, your journey secured. And we thank Barracuda for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, so school, like everything, has moved almost entirely online in recent months. Every aspect of schooling carries technical challenges that must be met in a fair and balanced way. So then, how are students held to a higher standard when they're doing things like taking exams, testing online? Pretty difficult challenge there. And joining us to talk about remote test proctoring in the age of the coronavirus is Mikah Chin from The Verge. Welcome to the show, Mikah.
Hi. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to get you here. Thank you for taking some time for us. So let's kind of start with the basics first and foremost. What is proctoring? Why is it necessary? Is this the kind of thing this is the kind of thing that we'd see in a normal school, but much differently than what we're seeing now. What is it?
Yeah, so online classes didn't start with coronavirus. They've been a thing for as long as the internet has existed. But certainly there's been a big uptick in online instruction since schools have all had to move their classes online. So essentially, when you have these online classes and you don't have a physical space where they take place, a lot of teachers are assigning tests and exams, and they're concerned about students cheating. And so one thing that some schools are doing to try to prevent cheating is they signed up for some of these online, virtual proctoring services. So there's a bunch of them. There's ProctorU, there's ProctorTrack. The one that I looked at today is one of the biggest and one of the fastest growing ones, and it's called Examity. And so the way it works is you download Zoom or you download one of these other chatting service, like virtual chatting services on your computer. I think GoToMeeting is another one. And then you video chat with a virtual proctor who is, somewhere in India or, one of these other places where the customer service stuff is outsourced to. And then they watch you take your test through your webcam. And, you have to stand up, you have to show them your whole room, so that they note you're not like hiding cheat notes on your desk, or you don't have like someone to the side whispering you the answers. And, then they watch your face, they watch your eyes for like suspicious eye movements. They watch your surroundings to make sure that someone's not coming in the background. They're watching you very closely. And then at the end, at least in some of these cases, the proctor you're actually required to give the proctor remote access to your computer. And the proctor then, has to enter a password to certify that you completed the test, and then submits it for you. So this is a thing that a lot of students find really creepy. And, I'm sure that some students are fine with it, but certainly some students are not. So that's what we were looking at in this article.
Well, I think I look back on my time, at university and everything. And when you're taking a major exam, like you're in a room, it's not just you, it's a bunch of other students who are also taking the exam. And you might have one or two instructors or teachers making sure that you're following the rules, that you're not breaking the rules. This almost feels like they're right up in your face, as one person's attention directly applied to one person, and not just attention. I mean, it's access to everything. That is very creepy. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and that's one thing, a lot of people ask, and this is a question I had at the beginning. I was like, well, when you take a test in person, someone's watching you too. What's the difference? I think for a lot of the students I talk to, a big difference is it's not someone it's not your professor, it's not your TA. It's a random person. You don't know who it is. You don't necessarily know that they're not going to try to snoop. And, I'm sure that many of these proctors are not malicious actors, but I think it's reasonable for some students to be worried. Well, what if it's hijacked? What if there's a data breach? There's definitely a lot more to be anxious about than there is if it's just your professor watching you in a classroom.
Yeah, no kidding. So, and then of course now, the necessity around this sort of approach, this service, I suppose, is heightened with COVID-19. So many more, students are at home taking tests and needing to do so legitimately in the eyes of the university or the school or whatever. So I imagine this is placing, a lot of impact on these companies and on students who have never had to experience this before. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, when we talked to the CEO of Examity, and he said they've seen a lot more demand for their service. I talked to some Examity proctors as well, and they said they've been working more hours and they have a lot more cases. So, it's definitely something that more places are adopting, that more professors are trying out, as more of this stuff has to go online, for sure.
Yeah. Are all proctoring, like online proctoring services, the same as far as what they require? Do some require more invasive access than others? How are there even a lot of proctoring services, or is it pretty limited? I imagine if it's been around since the beginning of the internet, that there's probably a lot of competition. But do they run things differently, or are there standards that they're held by?
There are a bunch of different ones. Examity is one of the biggest ones, and it was named one of the biggest, fastest growing ed tech companies in the past couple of years. But there are definitely a lot of other ones. One that I had to use in college is called Turnitin. It's not nearly as, there's no video chatting element with it, but you have to, when you submit your paper, it goes through your paper and, looks at every phrase and like cross-references it with the internet, and then alerts the professor if it thinks you cheated. So that, there's that, I would say, is one of the less invasive ones, and then going all the way up to this. But there, like I said, there are AI solutions where there's not a physical proctor involved. And then of course there are those with physical proctors as well. Even within Examity though, there are different tiers depending on what the professor wants. So there are offerings where there's not a proctor involved, where it's all virtual. And then there are offerings where the proctor's involved. So it's, I think a lot of these companies do, try to be flexible and offer different plans for what the professor wants, for sure. But I did talk to a number of students who had to use it had to use this, what I would say is the most invasive option, which is the proctor watching over the webcam. One of the students I talked to called it the nuclear option. If the cheating and trying to catch the cheaters is like an arms race. But yeah, I mean, definitely not all services are the same, and they're going to be, professors are going to use different ones depending on their expectations.
Yeah, what their needs are and everything. How effective are they in catching cheating? Because I mean, covering all those bases and watching eye twitch movements and everything, man, it just sounds kind of crazy. But I wonder, maybe it's impossible to know whether they've been effectively cheated on or not. But are they effective at catching cheating?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's kind of hard to know because, I'm not sure that they would necessarily know if a cheater had gotten away with cheating. But, in the course of researching this article, I definitely did encounter students who said that they had successfully cheated it. And I talked to others, none of the students I talked to, admitted to having cheated, but most of them thought, yeah, there are definitely ways. There were some Reddit threads that are pretty funny that have just all these different people listing all these ways that they either had, cheated one of these services or thought that you could. People were like taping iPads to their monitors and like drawing on the inside of phone cases and, just doing all of that. I mean, it's really interesting just the lengths to which these people will go to cheat, and I think that's, it's actually, I think it's kind of interesting, you have these students who really want to cheat who come up with all these innovative new ways to cheat. And so in response, these companies put out the software that's more and more invasive. And in response, the cheaters innovate again and try new things to cheat. And, it really is just this cycle where, you just keep the cheaters versus the software, does anyone really win or does privacy just lose,
Yeah, totally. Like you said, an arms race, that's a perfect way to put it. And it will probably always be that way because let's be real, there are a lot of people out there who just don't want to study or maybe exactly. Feel like cheating is their only option or whatever.
And they put more work. They put more work into the cheating than if they would have just studied. Usually is how that ends up happening.
Well, and you kind of get the sense from looking at some of these Reddit threads that, not only is it they don't want to study, but that it's kind of a point of pride for them. They're thinking, true. Look, these people thought they could catch cheating, but they can't because I beat them, So it seems like, some of these people are going to find ways to cheat no matter what you do.
Is there a better way to do a service like this without kind of like the invasive qualities of it? Because especially, I mean, right now, in particular, the past few years, we as a society, a technologically adept society, have become more and more, concerned with surveillance. And I mean, just take a look at today's show. Like there are a number of stories in today's rundown that have to do with surveillance is very top of mind. Is there a way to do this proctoring that isn't quite so surveillance heavy, or is that just kind of part of the game? I don't know how you do it otherwise.
Yeah, one thing I think is really interesting, not just about Examity in general, but kind of about the online, the whole online education thing as a whole, is I think it kind of illustrates the limitations of multiple choice tests as a tool, as an evaluative tool, because I think it shows not only is it kind of difficult to keep students from cheating when they're not sitting right in front of you, but, it kind of just shows how, maybe having your grade decided by something that's really easily Googleable isn't the best way to do this at all. And, one professor I spoke to, I asked, do you use Examity for online classes? And she said, no, I just try to set up a scenario where students are less likely to cheat. There's so many other options for a lot of classes. There are things like group projects or solo projects and papers, and it's not like you can't cheat on those, but it's certainly, it's a lot harder to cheat on something that's not a multiple choice test, even like a short answer test, than it is to just where you can just Google the answer. So I think that, if a class can do something like that instead, not only do you not have to use these invasive tools, but, I think in many ways it's probably a better evaluation of how well the student understands the material, because it's not the type of thing that you can just look up.
Yeah, right. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Monica Chin, writing for The Verge, theverge.com. Monica, if people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MC296.
Nice. Love that. Thank you so much, Monica. It's a pleasure talking with you, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon. All right. So now that we're at home, we're relying very heavily on our internet connection to stand up to the challenge of constant usage. I hear everybody kind of talking about this, how wow, the scenario has really changed now that we're here relying on our internet. We realize just how good or not good it is. It becomes clear when there are deficiencies in the chain. Case in point, Wi-Fi. I was actually struggling with this earlier this morning. When an internet connection goes down or goes south, slows down, that sort of thing, people often blame the Wi-Fi connection. That certainly could be the culprit. Could be other things. And it's really just a matter of like figuring out where in the chain it resides. And joining us to share some tips on improving our internet in the home, hopefully without having to drop any cash in the process, is Geoffrey Fowler from the Washington Post. Welcome back to the show, Jeff.
Glad to be here.
It's great to have you back. We love having you on the show. Thank you for taking the time. So first of all, let's start kind of with like our internet in home and the way things were and the way things are. Were our connections always bad? Do we just notice it now that like more now that we're like so directly tied to it, like our livelihoods depend on this internet connection, or was it always bad?
I think Wi-Fi has always been sort of America's #1 tech challenge or tech problem, maybe kind of neck and neck with robocalls. But definitely right now, it is winning over robocalls because our jobs are relying on it. Our ability to learn or go to school is relying on it. Our ability to be entertained and stay connected with the people that we care about is relying on it. So I think that's why certainly we're noticing it. Also, there's been a shift in the patterns of our behavior, right? We are now online much more in the middle of the day, whereas previously the network sort of expected us in the mornings and in the evenings in particular. So networks are just sort of having to deal with a new reality of what we need from them. So I think all of that is combining to people feeling pretty frustrated with their connections right now.
Yeah, and it's a challenge too, because you can jump through all the fiery hoops, do everything that is required or that is recommended or whatever, and still come out the other end like scratching your head. It can be very confusing. Thankfully, it's gotten a little bit easier with Wi-Fi mesh, networking systems the last couple of years. That used to be such a challenge to do that, and now they've made it really easy. So hopefully that gives people a few more tools. But what I liked about your article was that you focused mostly on ways that you can troubleshoot, ways that you can focus on your Wi-Fi if you're encountering problems that don't necessarily cost a lot of money or any money out of pocket for most of the solution. And you say in the article it all starts with your equipment. What is it about today's work from home environment that's such a challenge for like a 6-year-old computer? Is it the video conferencing aspect? Like 6 years ago, could these computers have video conferenced and now they can't? And why is that?
Yeah, I think the tools that we're using, things like Zoom, can actually require a fair amount out of our devices. They can require, if you want to do some of the fancier effects, you need discrete graphics in the device. And it's just a lot of the things that folks are using at home just weren't really built with this in mind. For example, in my house, we've got a kind of 6 or 7 year old MacBook Air, and trying to like do the Zoom call and also like look at other resources on the computer, do email, pull up, see slides. It just was not working. And I think sometimes people confuse a problem with their internet with a problem with their device. So we should really start this process, what I call sort of CSI Wi-Fi, trying to get to the bottom of what's really causing the problem. Start with just looking at the device you've got. And if you see that, some devices in your home are doing okay, whereas others are really struggling, that's an indication it might be the device.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your article that you kind of ran into this limitation with that MacBook Pro. And I also happen to have a MacBook Pro that's that old in the house, and I've encountered similar issues. But you ended up taking a secondary device to be your streaming device, and then having another device to be your managing all the documents and everything like that. And that solves the problem, or at least that's one solution. Not everybody has a couple of computers hanging around, but if you do, that's one way to tackle it. Now,
a lot of people have that old iPad sitting around in a drawer somewhere. That like doesn't really do much. Well, if it can do one thing right now, and if it can show you the two-way conversation, you're good.
Yeah, absolutely. That frees your other computer for so many other things that you need to do. So you were talking about, confusing the equipment with the internet. I think another confusion that often happens is Wi-Fi speed versus kind of the internet service speed that's coming into the home. How and that can be really confusing to a user who's maybe not as aware or as adept at kind of using tools to understand the difference between the two. But how can a user determine which one in that chain is slowing them down and is going wired? I realize it's a dated option, but is that a better solution in some cases?
Yeah. So the next big question here, got to figure out, is it your Wi-Fi or is it your internet service provider? The easiest way for most people with devices like phones or tablets or even laptops that don't necessarily have the wired connection available to them anymore is just to go get as close as possible to the Wi-Fi router in your house and run a speed test. You can use speedtest.net. You can also use fast.com, which is owned by Netflix. Note the numbers there, and then go walk over to the part of your house where maybe you're also having some internet troubles. Run the test again and compare those numbers. And if the speeds, the upload and the download speeds are much worse further away from your router, you've got a Wi-Fi problem. If the numbers are low kind of in both places, you might have a problem with your ISP or your modem or something to do with your basic internet connection. Even better if you've got some device that you can plug directly via Ethernet into your router or into your cable modem. Even better, that'll really isolate the problem. I just think most people don't really have those these days.
Yeah, absolutely. You also talk about your home and your 100-year plus home with chicken wire that is apparently in the walls. And these are elements that people just don't think about, right? They're like, well, I've got 4 walls, but so does my friend, and he gets great Wi-Fi. How come I don't get great Wi-Fi? It could be that there's metal, sheets of metal running through your walls that prevent the spread. Yeah,
it's actually called a Faraday cage by the physicists, and it just happens to have those chicken wires just happen to have the perfect size hole openings in them that it blocks the waves from coming through. And it's actually really common here in the San Francisco Bay Area with houses that were built of a certain era, and it just kills the Wi-Fi. So you got to figure out something else to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I recently had to switch to a new ISP. Thankfully, it happened right before the shelter in place happened. It was just a coincidence that it lined up. Prior to that, my internet speeds were really slow. Ended up switching to Comcast, which was a deal with the devil. But my internet speeds are at least fast enough that I could do my job at home. In the end, I'm really happy I did that. So the bottleneck was the service that I was getting before the switch. Also happened to save money in the switch. Is that the last resort, you think, in all of this? Like maybe it's not your Wi-Fi, maybe it's your ISP. Switching might be the solution.
Yeah, I mean, definitely figure out first if it's your Wi-Fi. And from the conversations I had about this with a lot of big ISPs. I talked to Comcast, Verizon, Sonic here in the Bay Area. I talked to big Wi-Fi router makers. I talked to Eero. I talked to Google Wi-Fi. I talked to Netgear. And everybody agreed that in like 90% of the cases, the problem is actually the Wi-Fi network. But if you're in that 10% of cases where it is actually something about the service you're getting, maybe your service provider just can't handle the load that's happening right now, it is worth a conversation about, telling them, that you're not getting what they promised you or what they advertised. And it could be that they maybe just need to tune something about the equipment that comes into your neighborhood. It could be that there's something wrong with your modem, or that your modem just needs an upgrade or just needs to be restarted. So there's a bunch of things that are going on. Yes, very last step could be switching ISPs, if that's even available to you. Unfortunately, a lot of Americans live in places where they really only have one good option in their neighborhood. The really last thing that I would recommend for people is paying more to your ISP to get faster speed. That should really be a last resort, and only do that if you're going to also test it, right? If you're going to pay them more money for more speed, make sure you're getting it in the real world situations that you need it. And if not, then downgrade back again. You don't need to give a free gift to Comcast every month.
Amen to that one. I upgraded my speeds, hoping to get better service, and it has for the most part been. But I think about folks who do end up upgrading and then they stop there. And yeah, you gotta make sure to take that next step of testing for sure, and test on all of your devices, right? Of course, we know that when you're plugged in, that's going to give you one speed, and when you're wireless, that's going to give you another. But depending on which device you're coming from and what chips are built in, it might provide for different speeds. So yeah, that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that point that you just mentioned there, Mikah, is really important, because I think it's easy to not realize that that is the case. If you are on Wi-Fi, you are very likely going to get a different speed than if you were directly plugged into the router. I've noticed that here a number of times. Like, I'm trying to upload something that I want to share, for work, like upload a video, and video files are large, and doing it over Wi-Fi, it's saying it's going to take an hour and a half or whatever. Plugging it in, it says it takes 45 minutes. So you get different speeds. Along that line of thinking, we have the new Wi-Fi 6 standard, which, it has in recent weeks kind of come into focus, been kind of anointed a place in our future once, hardware and systems are upgraded or created to support it. Do you think that's going to be a solution? Let's say 2 years down the line, do you think that's going to affect and change and improve this scenario?
Someday, maybe, but I think most Americans tend to hold on to their gadgets for a long time, and it's growing longer all the time. Even our phones now we're holding on to longer and longer. So it's going to be a number of years, both until we have enough devices in our home, and also just people upgrade their routers and other kinds of systems. I mean, remember, lots and lots of people are still using, those old Apple routers. Remember the Airport Express in the airport? Like they officially abandoned that
their souls.
Years ago. I know, but they think that since they spent so much money on an Apple router, that it must be good. But that tech does move along. I think the bigger tech leap that's going to make a difference in people's lives more immediately is the shift to mesh networks. The first one we really got for consumers was around 2016 with Eero, which is now owned by Amazon. But that has really made a big difference. And of course, now you get those systems available from Netgear and from Google and from lots of different makers. But the mesh systems where you have multiple sort of hubs around the house that are all connected to each other wirelessly, and spread your Wi-Fi around throughout either a large space or kind of a unusual space, I think that is the leap that really is making a difference in at least stopping the frustration people have with dead zones, because dead zones are the real problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So frustrating. And I would completely agree. Mesh networks have really saved our household as far as bringing the internet to the rooms that wouldn't get it before. And thankfully, like I said earlier, they've made it so much easier now. It used to be really difficult to set these kinds of networks up, and now it's a breeze. So anyone can just pick up one of those mesh networks, plug it into a few different rooms, and see immediate impact. Of course, that's going to cost you money. So hopefully you can support that, but it is a good option if you have the money to support it. Jeff, it's always awesome getting you on the show. Thank you for hopping on with us today. If people want to follow you online, where can they do so?
I'm at Geoffrey Fowler on Twitter, or you can subscribe to the Washington Post. We've got a lot of really useful stuff, particularly in this coronavirus time.
Yeah, indeed. We appreciate your work and your time. Thank you so much, Geoffrey. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
You bet.
Take care.
All righty. Well, we are doing
time.
Stories of the Week. It's time for Stories of the Week. I just made a song for Stories of the Week. So my story this week is about tracking. That's right. As you mentioned earlier in the show, there are some conversations to be had around privacy and data protection. And one of those things is the conversation around apps that help us to track the spread of coronavirus. Many different companies, many different countries, many different counties, many different governments have released or are working on apps that help to track the spread of coronavirus, and they're implementing it in different ways. There are pushes to use Apple and Google's technology. There are pushes to not use Apple and Google's technology. There's pushback from different companies. I mean, it's a mess. And this article from the New York Times tries to sort of collect all of that together and talk about the sort of struggle that's taking place right now as we are working toward a solution. So, like I said, there are many different apps that are out there right now, but of course, we're looking for a tool that is trustworthy, that does right by our data, and it's not easy. It's not easy to do, and it often involves complex understanding of how our different devices that we have work, and complex understanding of the psychology behind the matter. And the problem with that, the big problem with that, is the fact that we are in the midst of this. This is not something that we were able to prepare for ahead of time and sort of create a technology that will help us track this. And so what that's resulted in is people just putting their, the nose to the grindstone and trying to make things work. And unfortunately, that results in hasty decisions and maybe results in software that doesn't hold up. I don't know about you, Jason, but I'm trying to think of a project that I worked on last minute for high school, or a paper that I wrote in college that maybe I didn't give as much time as I needed to. And you sort of kind of prop it up with what you have, and you try to make it work, and you maybe say, oh, I could have done better with this, but I don't have time, and so I'll just go with this. And that's kind of the sort of theme behind a lot of this technology.
Yeah, I can see the concern there for sure, and I feel that that's one element of it. I think there are a lot of very smart people working on this, because we all agree that what's happening right now, we want to have the tools to navigate it safely and effectively. So I have no doubt that there are people with best intentions and people who are smart enough to rise to the challenge. But like you said, there's so many different avenues that different states. I think the article pointed out that North Dakota. The governor of North Dakota literally asked a friend of his who was a software engineer, hey, could we create an app that tracks people? And it's like, yeah, sure, let's do that. And when you're talking about the kind of weight, the magnitude of what's happening right now, and then you're talking about the potential data implications for the people who would be using these, that kind of scenario that's created by hey, I got a friend of mine to build us an app, what do you think? Suddenly gets a little bit more complicated. Maybe the potential downsides are overlooked in that haste. I think another challenge here is just the fact that these systems, and I'm happy that they are, but these systems are voluntary, right? So in order for these systems to really work, these apps to track effectively and be able to keep everybody updated, which is ultimately the point, or at least that's the point of the people who would be using it. We want to know if we've crossed paths with someone who has the coronavirus symptoms or whatever. If that's only running on 10, 20, 30% of a population, they're less effective. How, so then you run into this scenario of okay, well, if this is a tool to protect us and it's not required on people's devices, then it's going to be less effective anyways. But if it's required, then we're requiring people to share tons of data and not have any true knowledge or certainty around what happens to that data when all of this is over. Does it go away? Does it delete after 30 days? Is it there forever? Does it fall into the hands of the government, and the government can do whatever they want with it? There's so many uncertainties right now about all this stuff.
Yeah. And like I said, that's kind of what this article aims to cover, is all of the uncertainty. Unfortunately, there's not really an answer for this right now. Companies and countries, all the different entities that I mentioned earlier are trying to come up with solutions, but there simply are not any at the moment. So it's something we've got to just keep watching, and I guess hoping that there's a system that will end up working. But until we get there, this is certainly a fascinating experience as we see companies and countries, et cetera, scramble to create something that actually will work. And hopefully we get something in the end, and that tool can be used in the future with even more insight when inevitably, this kind of thing happens again, because, that's how history works. So
we don't want it to happen again, though.
I know. Maybe not in our time.
Again, Mikah.
Maybe not in our time, but who knows? Jason, do you have a happier story for us?
Well, I guess so. It's not about data tracking. Mostly. If you're getting a little tired of Zoom, who might be tracking your data, so there's the mostly, and you want to try a different video conferencing experience, now might be a good time to look at Google Meet. Google just very recently in the last couple of days opened it up to everyone. So before their video conferencing service, their premium video conferencing service, because they had Google Hangouts that you could still do video calls on. And I think they still do. But before, this particular app was limited to users of G Suite. That's their paid business suite of services. So education, the enterprise, that sort of stuff. So we were using it here at Twit for some of our meetings and everything. We saw the differences firsthand between Google Meet and kind of the traditional Hangouts video conferencing. But now Google has opened it up to anyone, which I think was a smart move. Google was in this space well before a lot of the other players, including Zoom, which is like the poster child of video conferencing right now. So it's kind of crazy that Google wasn't able to kind of catch that wave. And I think part of it is their tool just was not up to the challenge right when all this stuff happened, and Zoom was, and so Zoom took off, and now all these companies are trying to outzoom Zoom. I like that. So anyways, they're making it free, 100-person max, any length of time, and that's great when you compare it to Zoom's 40-minute max if you're on a free account. So here it's any length of time. They expect probably sometime around September 30th, maybe longer, that they might switch that over to a 60-minute length of time limit. But that might change if all this stuff is still going on. And as we know, it very well could be. But it's an alternative. They did recently include a new feature that allows for kind of like the Brady Bunch view with all the different squares, I think up to 16 squares on the page at once. And again, we've used that at Twit, and it works fine. So I don't know. It's an alternative. Want to mention it.
I think any alternative is good for multiple reasons. One, because there have been concerns. I think that some of those concerns have been answered, and some of the stuff was, if not unfounded, it was mishandled by the time it got to the masses. The conversations were misunderstood and sort of disseminated to the masses in an incorrect way. Regardless of that, though, yes, there are concerns there. And so for that reason, choice is good, but also for the reason that competition leads to better practices and better, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't always lead to better practices, but certainly leads to better technology in the end. And so having these different companies vying for a space on your device is nice. And in fact, just this morning some of us used a different technology for a call that we did. I had never heard of the company, and so I chose not to download and install the application on my device, but it was interesting to see that there are even more out there than I knew about. And so anytime that this is happening, I think it's good, except for Facebook creating their little messenger meet system, because, I think we all feel pretty similarly about Facebook. So other than that, I'm happy that there's competition out there, and Google Meet is one of those options.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Competition kind of breeds a one-upsman sort of thing between these products. And Meet is a prime example of that, right? Like, they didn't have the 16 participants on one screen view prior to this competition aspect with Zoom. And now they do. Now they all do, because everybody loves that view. Like, yeah, I can see everybody all at once. And it's a little bit more of a connecting kind of view for these video conferences. So that's what drove that decision, I imagine. And also, like, if you're kind of feeling Zoom fatigue, fatigue. I should mention that today The Verge had an article reported that Zoom had told investors that it was seeing 300 million daily active users, right, which is a great number, which is like, they got a lot of attention for it. Silently, a few days later, they went into their site and changed that to reflect that it was actually daily meeting participants. And that might seem like a small difference, but it's actually a very big difference in the fact that they received a lot of attention for the number when they first announced it, and then silently changed it is what's kind of alarming. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Once again, you're kind of being a little shady with how you're delivering the news on this. But the difference is many users do multiple Zooms a day, each time being a participant while still the same user. So 300 million active users would be independent users of the service. 300 million participants could be like a percentage of that total number, because it could be I was on 5 meetings in one day instead of being 5 people. So interesting, once again, Zoom kind of running into this kind of challenge of public perception with how they're running the business. At the same time, it doesn't seem to be slowing Zoom down. Zoom seems to be doing okay. And I see a lot of people doing a lot of Zoom calls right now and kind of disregarding, any of the security stories that have come up around it, and, this and ethical, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So who knows if that's going to change, but
we'll see.
But I think that's it.
That's an episode.
That's an episode. We can close the book on this episode almost. This is the final chapter where we tell you to go to twit.tv/TNW. That is the show page on the web for Tech News Weekly. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show. You can find all of our subscribe links there for audio, video, link over to YouTube. If that's your jam, go over to YouTube and watch and leave us really good comments, the good ones. We like the good ones. twit.tv/TNW.
Beautiful. You, of course, can choose to be a part of the show if you'd like. You just email tnw@twit.tv. We don't get many emails there, but if you've got one, send it our way. See what happens. Of course, follow us on social media. That's @twit on Twitter. That's @twit.tv on Instagram. @twittalk on TikTok. I do want to say you absolutely should be following us on those social media platforms, because if you are, then you know that tomorrow we are doing a live cooking competition. I'm so excited about this. Just wait. Shelter in Kitchen tomorrow. If you haven't heard about it, check it out. Follow Twit on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, and you'll learn about it. If you, for some reason, want to, there's the video. If you want to,
you really do have to watch the promo. We don't have to watch it right now in full, but please watch the promo.
Fantastic.
It's so great.
You can follow me on Twitter @Mikah Sargent. I am @Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media platforms, or head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUAHUA.coffee, with links to all the things I do. And of course, got an episode later today coming out of Hands on iOS. So be sure to check that out. I create Merida from Brave, Pixar's Brave, in Memoji to show you how to create your own Memoji and use those when you wake up in the morning and you just don't feel like getting ready and looking all nice before you do a FaceTime or something like that. Just use a Memoji instead. It's so easy. Jason, what about you?
It. That's awesome. @Jason Howell on Twitter. My show that I'll plug is Hands on Android. Have a new episode that just published. And that went up. It's basically an episode that dives into the hidden developer options menu, how to unlock it, and what are some features within developer options on your Android device that might actually be useful for everyday users, not just for developers. There are a lot of features in there, a lot that developers really, enjoy having those tools. They're basically tools to help them develop better apps. But there are a lot of features that you could use as an everyday user. So that's twit.tv/HOA to check that out. And thanks to John for editing and pushing that out this morning. Also, thanks to John for hitting buttons on today's show, Tech News Weekly, as well as Burke for being in the studio as backup, wearing face mask and all that stuff that is required. And thanks to you for watching and listening to Tech News Weekly. We'll see you all next week on another episode. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.